Hello. Welcome to another episode of the Always Be Testing podcast. I'm your host, Tye DeGrange, and I'm really excited to talk to Amro Naddy today. Amro, how you doing, man?
Good. Happy to be here, Ty. Good to see you again.
Absolutely. Good to see you too. We are ready to dive in. I can't believe we are already in the midst of Q4, which is crazy. This year has flown by. Where did it all go?
Crunch time. Q4.
Let's go. Let's go. Um, Amro is going to be just an awesome addition to the pod. I'm so happy to chat. We've had some amazing conversations. He's had an amazing run, 20 years experience in e-commerce, built out monetization arm of US News and Report, which is no small feat. So a lot of learnings to talk about, which is near and dear to our heart. Um, let's jump right in. Tell the story of you launching 360 reviews at US News and World Report. I'm dying to hear about, that whole journey that you went through to do what you did. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, where to start? Seven years. I guess it's kind of in a way, maybe one way to structure it is to talk about it being a story with three phases. I think of it as kind of you know, joining on. My first day was Halloween 2018, so late October. I joined with U.S. News and World Report, and the kind of vague idea was, we think that the U.S. News and World Report brand could be extended from the places that it's traditionally been, like college reviews and hospital reviews, and then some of their other areas like automotive and car reviews, credit cards. We think that there's more kind of meat on the bone. There's more categories, more areas that U.S. News can help consumers make important decisions. And sort of looking at the brand, which is kind of, bar none, one of the best in rankings out there, which every American knows almost because of the college ranking franchise.
Yeah, yeah.
And then sort of looking at the domain authority of, I think it floats between 92 and 93, which is, about as good as it gets. I agreed, and I saw a big opportunity for us to extend into search and rankings and reviews. And so it really was kind of a memo. It's sort of a concept phase that my boss, Chad Smolinski, and I developed into sort of memos, financial models, and sort of took from concept into, I would say, one of the top, maybe somewhere between 5 to 10 review sites on the internet. And I would say probably top three within the, most high priority areas and some of the most competitive review businesses on the internet. And so, and I'll qualify top 10 within certain niches, but I think top three, especially within certain niches. So, I think it's a story that goes from concept to sort of scale. And I think that there's, some of what we talked about in earlier in previewing the episode was there was a startup concept phase where it was like, how do you go get stuff done, see what sticks, 0 to 1.
Mm-hmm.
And then there was sort of a second phase, which was sort of growth phase, and it's kind of 1 to 10. These numbers, all the business information is confidential, but in general, sort of metaphorical way, 1 to 10.
Yeah.
And then eventually sort of what I call the multiple tens phase. So like, portfolio of multiple material businesses, multiple divisions there. And I think it was a fun story that we started to talk about, that we'll talk about today. Of I think the way that you do things in the 0 to 1 phase is different than how you do it the kind of multiple tens sort of portfolio business phase. And I certainly don't think I nailed it in every key phase, but I think you learn so much about, the 4,000 things not to do, and then the 3 or 4 things that maybe kind of to do.
That's amazing. Yeah, a man that, you've we chatted a lot, and I know, we may draw from your whiteboard for inspiration. You did an amazing job of kind of like talking that through, and it's so fascinating because I think we talk about a lot internally in our journey. It's been a long one for a group like ourselves. And so it's a really interesting call out of like each business has a unique um, phase typically, and I think it makes a lot of sense. Um, is I have to ask, sort of off the cuff, is there anything was there a phase that you maybe enjoyed more than any other, or is there, I don't even, I'm curious about that.
Oh, that's a great question. So I'm going to answer a different question, but it's going to sort of circle back to it. I can tell you the phase I sucked at the worst. And the phase I sucked at the worst, I actually did, introducing the whiteboard here, I did sort of chart out, the 0 to 1, the 1 to 10, the sort of multiple tens phase. The phase I sucked at the worst was the sort of 1 to 10 phase, because I think by its nature, it's kind of a messy middle. It's the middle school of your sort of business education, right? Like you're, I think of it in team size. Like for us, when I think of that kind of phase, it was when we had, I think at scale, at like total peak, we had over 100 full-time employees, and then lots of contractors, freelancers, and the whole 9 yards on the back of it. But over 100 people on the team, and that was what I guess I consider scale, and was a pretty big milestone. The messy middle for me was when we started to have about like 50 or 60 team members. And the part that I sucked at was transitioning from being someone who can run a 10 to 20 person team as sort of the manager and sort of sitting at the center of the business and the operation, having my hands on all the levers and making sure, every decision goes through Amro. That approach can work very well in 0 to 1, but at a certain point, learning how to let go of maybe the first 1 or 2 levels and empower downline folks in your division or divisions or whatever it is, empower your managers. That, like, when you're in that middle phase, you still have to be hands-on, but knowing when and where to be hands-on is a little bit, it's like discretionary. It's like a call that you have to make. And I don't think I think I probably botched that call, as often as I made it work. And then I think when you get to kind of some degree of scale, it changes, and there's far fewer times where you're sort of in it so much.
Yeah.
You're kind of driving accountability.
Yeah.
I'm going to use the V word, vision, which I think is actually really useful, but it's kind of floated around a bit.
Yeah, overused
a bit, but I think it's like, so getting back to your question about which phase did I enjoy, I think I think we naturally gravitate towards enjoying the things we're good at. And I think I enjoyed kind of the early startup phase, as a builder, as a tinkerer, as a, like the explosive growth that you see in 0 to 1, and that ride, which any founder, any entrepreneur or intrapreneur can tell you, when you have a good ride going 0 to 1, it's awesome. Every day is learning, big growth. It's great.
Yeah.
And I think that maybe the scale side, when you sort of got a business and it's operating, it feels a little bit like, I'm not a surfer, but it feels a bit like what I've heard surfing a big wave is like, where you just hit this, this momentum, and you're kind of sort of coast, and you can sort of, like, the way that you're managing it or leading it is a little bit more light touch. Sometimes things come up dramatic, but it's generally more light touch, and that's a really fun. That's a really fun skill. Like it's very fun when you can tackle big problems with a person team and sort of knock them out. And so I think those two are interesting. Were like the most gratifying for
me. When did you feel like you were kind of surfing, for lack of a better term?
When I was surfing, I think that was phase. That was like the maturity phase. That's like 100 people.
The third phase.
The third phase, yeah. It's like maturity. That's cool. Business.
Did you feel like that challenging middle was going, if I'm hearing you correctly, it sounds like, were you going from like manager to managing managers?
I think it was probably another layer above that. It was like
Mm.
managing. I think the first time that I managed another VP or a senior director, and then that VP or senior director has like two layers underneath them. That's where
Yeah.
I think like when you start managing managers, that's totally a milestone, totally valid, and presents its own challenges. But you can sort of see how if you think about General Electric and Jack Welch, that used to be the big like business.
Yeah. It's the holy grail of like business management, right?
Yeah, in the 80s, that was like the swag.
Yeah.
That was like the Google.
Even in the 90s, I remember like reading about it, and like, it was talked about all the time still.
Yeah, and like you think about a General Electric, you think about like there's probably 12 layers between Jack Welch, the famous CEO, and sort of frontline worker. There's this like escape velocity that you get when it's like a certain couple of layers removed from the frontline work that,
Hmm.
that I think the work can get a little bit abstracted. And so that
Yeah.
you have to sort of take pains to do things every day to remember, like, empowering the front lines is really important. Understanding the customer is really important. And that's so obvious when you're sort of doing the work or a step above it, but it gets less obvious, I would imagine for a Jack Welch in a boardroom somewhere, it's less obvious that he needs to sort of empower the front line or focus on
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. No, that's great. That's super helpful. And I love that story and just like all that you were able to witness and achieve there. And the learnings just had to have been immense, obviously, for you to go through. US News obviously has a reputation, rigorous, ethical, data-driven standards for the reviews themselves. Reviews are a whole topic that is probably worth talking about. How did you and the team, find that balance, especially through the growth phases of the, common challenge of the age-old challenge of that editorial commercial balance and kind of going into new, categories and growing volume and growing headcount and having all these commercial demands on you? How did you balance that? I'm dying to hear more of your perspective there.
Yeah, I think those are like two questions. At least I would think there's two questions. The first being, you know, um, how do you preserve the wall between editorial and business, and why does it exist? How does it exist? How do you make that happen? I think the second is like, where should you extend the brand? I think to the first question of how do you sort of build and maintain the wall between business and editorial, I think there's a lot of aspects of business that are a little bit discretionary, and then there's some other parts of business that are like bright line. There is a rule, and this is that rule. Um, I think editorial independence is kind of the latter camp. It's like there's a bright line, and you just don't.
Yeah.
But here's how some of that looks like in practice, and how I've seen it at media companies and publishers.
Mm.
So, one topic is whether and at what level editors can see revenue or know about business relationships and partner relationships. And I've seen a number of different companies that do it a number of different ways. Typically, I think the gold standard within traditional media is that if you have a line editor, like someone who is touching words and issuing, opinions and sculpting reviews and such, that line editor almost never sees revenue. There are some exceptions, not at US News and what we saw, but there are some exceptions. Maybe sometimes commerce teams will operate a bit differently, but usually most review teams, frontline editor almost never sees revenue and business relationships. There becomes a level above that of maybe managing editor or section editor or something whose job is more managerial. Less likely, less typical that they'll see revenue. I've seen businesses where they do. And then you probably start to hit like director VP. And I think at the director VP level, it becomes more commonplace. Like that director or VP of content or editorial, they're an executive at that point. Like they're kind of helping manage the business and allocating resources into priority and making sort of priority decisions. And I think it's more typical that directors and VPs of content can see revenue, and I think it's ultimately incumbent on them as the person who runs that all important function, right, to preserve that within their function. And I think it's also incumbent on business and product leaders, marketing leaders, whatever it is, to keep that information out from the sort of meetings that have editorial. And we would follow very explicit processes where we might have a managers meeting where we're talking about topics that 15 or 20 managers need to talk about. But when it came to talking about revenue or talking about partnerships or whatever it is, we would sort of cleave the meeting in half and say, all right, anyone who can't hear about this stuff, we break.
Yeah.
Plus, you guys kick those folks off the call, and then sort of get into the partnership stuff. Another kind of aspect that I think is interesting is so US News is famous for methodology-driven rankings and reviews, which is a little different than some other media companies, which will have more like an expert editor has tested a bunch of stuff and their opinion based on testing drives the review. For US News, typically it was, math has been done relative to some, parameters about products or services, whatever it is. And those, the math sort of dictates the review. And over time, within 360, we kind of built more opportunities for editorial testing or editorial perspectives to weigh into the methodology. But generally, it leans more towards like a math exercise when you do rankings and reviews. And the nice thing about that is it's sort of purpose built to not have any sort of corruption or any sort of influence from the business, because I can't affect the math. Like the math is the math, and it's set by an editorial and research team that are doing independent work. And the fact is, my take, Tye, is you pay an integrity tax where sometimes some credible national brand is an advertiser, and they'll pay you a bundle of money if they're ranked number one, and they might be ranked number one in a rating cycle, and they'll say, "Oh, Amro, thanks for that," and I'll be like, "But I didn't have anything to do with that number one ranking." And then they'll go down to like 8th place. They'll be like, "Oh my God, what's going on? We have this great business relationship." I'm like, listen, it has nothing to do with the rankings. You can be number one again in 6 months. And on the whole, like that hits the business a little bit. Like there's probably low double-digit percentage kind of tax that you pay to have that editorial separation. It doesn't, in a localized sense, like relative to a category, it's not going to tank the business when these things happen. But sometimes you'll see a swing that occurs. But to me, I'll pay that tax all day long because you have a reputable brand and a reputable commitment to the consumer. And I think that's
love that.
A slice of profit that you give up for that.
No, that's so amazing. You were leading up to that. I was starting to think through, how questions around it, like tenants, is something that, Amazon really emphasizes. And, you can use words like algorithms and all, which I think similar to vision can be misused sometimes. But I think that, having that system in place is really liberating and I think helpful, especially if it does align with, going back to your favorite word, the vision, and it differentiates and is valuable to the user. The thing that jumps into my mind is it kind of reminds me of the cowboy code conversations we've been having, talking about just our shared values and things that I grew up on, and fun lessons from my upbringing, and like some things aren't for sale. And I think that notion that you said of integrity tax, is that what you said?
The integrity tax. Yeah,
I love that. It's gonna be a good one, and I think that's a really smart learning. It's just Yeah, you must have seen a lot of examples of that throughout the business, I would imagine.
Well, I mean, there's a great story that I remember in the early days. This is 0 to 1 days, so this is like January 2019. Okay, I had seen this article. So we were figuring out what categories to expand into in the early days of 360, and the first category we started with was home security. Um, Chad, my boss at the time, had sort of gotten the ball rolling on home security when I joined, and then I was sort of tasked with go figure out the next set of categories to expand into. And one of the first categories that I felt strongly we needed to test doing reviews in was mattresses. And the reason why is this great article that came out. Did you ever read, Ty, the Fast Company article about Sleepopolis and Casper? Do you remember this?
I remember it popping up. I don't recall it specifically. I don't know if I actually read it. I
So
remember a lot going on in that space and seeing stuff pop up like that, though.
yeah, this is like who knows if it's true, but this is the Fast Company kind of article that came out 2017, 2018. And what had happened was something like this. Probably going to butcher it, but Sleepopolis was the kind of top SEO ranked niche publisher doing mattress and sleep reviews at the time. God knows who Sleepopolis is. Just one of those like vertical specific niche review brands.
Hmm.
And so Sleepopolis is reviewing every mattress out there, and then it gets to the Casper mattress, and it basically says, "Boy, this thing is god awful. Don't ever buy a Casper mattress. It's just the flipping worst."
Hmm.
And so Casper is obviously not particularly stoked about that negative review. And this is like the top
Hmm.
side thing. Casper sucks. Don't ever buy it. And so my understanding of the article is that Casper sues the bejesus out of Sleepopolis. And they're like, I don't know under what terms. Who knows what lawsuits? Hey,
Sure.
you're libeling us, whatever it is. They're suing,
Yeah.
and Sleepopolis is like, oh, how dare you? This is editorial independence and journalism, whatever the fight is. Right? So, so meanwhile, this like battle is being duked out in a set of lawsuits, and the venture capitalists that were bankrolling Casper just kind of looked at the situation and they were like, my God, guys, like we're wasting all this money on litigation. This tiny little review site is worth like $4 million or something. Let's just buy the damn thing and then we'll change the review. And so the Fast Company basically article says these VCs just bought Sleepopolis. And lo and behold, like 24 hours later, suddenly there's a great review of the Casper mattress on it. And I showed that to the leadership team and to Chad, my boss at the time. And I was like, look, there's a real cleanup that's needed in the online review space. Like there's, I think there's good work that can happen with niche publishers and niche review sites, but the temptation to not pay that integrity tax and just
Yeah.
do these pay to play or corrupt kind of dynamics, it can be a very strong temptation for a small business. And to give Sleepopolis its credit, I mean, I don't know the Sleepopolis guys, I don't know anything about it, but to give them their credit, it seems like they wanted to do the right thing. They originally thought the Casper mattress stung, and maybe tried to fight it, but they kind of got swept up in it. And I thought, doesn't it just validate the opportunity that we could come in and help out, whether it's in home security or in mattress or insurance products, which we launched, or in
Yeah.
all sorts of stuff around commerce and home service.
Yeah.
So I just thought that was kind of
Oh,
interesting.
oh yeah. Love that. Love that. It totally hits on so many things for me, in particular, with regard to our cowboy code shtick. It all stems from trust. And that's like everything we do. We've been working on that for years and years and you know that. And so it's fascinating. I was actually having this conversation this morning as I was sharing. I had a really nice coffee meeting with a business potential client that has become a friend, and it's like health and wellness. And we're talking about um, kind of influencers content and podcast in particular, and how a lot of those head tail elite, massive podcasts that like Huberman, Rogan, whatever,
Yeah.
it's they every channel goes through these peaks and valleys and evolutions and changes, right? And how a user perceives things. We you and I know we live in this trust gap era where consumers, rightfully so, are pretty skeptical. And this is a great example of that situation. And for you guys to think, okay, how do we avoid this? How we lean into authentic, real, data-driven reviews as opposed to biases is really important, especially for everything that you and I, our entire ecosystem is that. And so I think for me, it goes back to like, what are you working on that is actually authentically driven versus, you know, juiced and gamed and things like that. And so I think for us to be in this, distrusting era, it's really important to highlight those things that we are doing that is authentic, real, validated, and tip of the cap for you all taking that on.
Yeah, I mean, and to that point, we really tried to push, I think, the ambitiousness or the ambition or whatever of some of the review content we were doing. Like, and I'll share an example of that. We did a lot of hyper local reviews where we would take, you know, national data sets or local data sets and sort of stitch them together with a bunch of other data and try to create, you know, thousands or tens of thousands of hyper local pages in different areas and stuff like that. I mean, it's really hard analytical work. There's no humanly way that a person sitting in, Austin, Texas, like you, Tye, um, if you wanted to calculate, I'm thinking about some of our best moving companies pages, which was a fun area for us to work on. We do something
Oh
like,
yeah.
who's the best mover in Austin, Texas, or what's the cost
Hmm.
from Austin to Dallas or something like that.
Hmm.
Those pages that we had built, or some of the content areas within those pages, it's really interesting content. It's data driven. It's hard to get that data. And I think the natural alternative is like, okay, Yelp, Google reviews, um, and, user generated content basically. And I think that some of the frontier of what we're seeing in reviews right now that I think is interesting is, we see more consumers moving away from Google into ChatGPT and AI tools, which are great. I use them
Yeah.
daily. I don't cook without my ChatGPT assistant anymore. He's got a British voice. His name is Lee. And oh, you're talking to Lee again? And I'm like, he's my kitchen buddy. So I think
That's great. Your sous chef.
it's my sous
I
chef.
can picture him now.
I should ask Lee what he looks like. I'd love to get a little, phone call
Yeah.
with Lee on it. Uh,
Yeah.
But so GPT and these things, they're great. They're great at synthesizing information and tailoring it. And, if they just announced yesterday, which late September, since this will probably come out not today, Stripe is doing this partnership with ChatGPT to make it easier to shop inside of ChatGPT.
Hmm.
Pretty awesome. And people can really customize their queries and say, I'm Tye and I'm this tall and I have this kind of foot. And so what kind of sneaker should I have if I want to do these activities? You get all this customization from Tye, from the consumer. What I worry about is that the underlying data that powers that is the sort of wisdom of the crowds. It's just like user generated content from all over, mostly Reddit and Wikipedia and like a few sources, but it's just kind of UGC. And I'm a little bit,
Yeah.
I'm more than a little bit skeptical that you can just apply killer math to a crap load of UGC and come up with just the right answer, and you're going to get this fabulous thing. I, I think that what the work that US News and other publishers were doing was not a wisdom of the crowds approach. It was a centrally sort of expertise driven approach, which is, how do we bring industry data and reputable sources and create a really, gold class or whatever gold standard methodology and bring it to a category. I tend to believe in that work. I'm drawn to that kind of work. I also see that, lots and lots of UGC can be interesting for, I don't know, sneakers or, small items or whatever, where you're going to have 30,000 reviews on the Labubu, whatever doll or whatever it is, small stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I think that's I think for big stuff, for big decisions, where I think US News crushes it. I think that there's a bunch of publishers out there that are addressing these needs. Red Ventures has a bunch. There's some great brands out there. But I think for like big purchases, I don't really want like some, mishmash of UGC and Reddit.
Yeah.
John Smith, 1971, says that like Geico is a great car insurance company.
Yeah.
Man, like that.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
That leads to the right answer.
It's so fascinating. It's such an interesting time, and obviously that dropped literally yesterday. And so
Yeah.
by the time this comes out, it'll still be news, and our team's talking about it. It's been speculated it was coming, all that, all that. I think the thing that I don't know, I'm excited because I think there's still such an opportunity. You nailed it, for those things that are more nuanced, require multiple stakeholders, whether that's B2B or a longer term decision like your insurance. Um, and I think there's that opportunity so real, and we still haven't figured it out yet. I sent a snapshot of, it was like a Statistica infographic showing 150,000 queries or something. Reddit and Wikipedia are at the top. Obviously, that's getting a lot of buzz. Obviously, that's getting a lot of chat. I sent it to the team like, how much you want to bet this is going to look very different in 1 year? Could be wrong. I'm curious to know what you think, but it kind of underscores what you're saying here. Like, is that really what you want to be hanging your hat on?
Yeah.
I mean, no offense. Like, there's plenty of information that is factual and helpful,
Yeah.
but there's plenty that's kind of not too.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think I have so many things to say about that, and we could go down a rabbit hole. I'll go like an inch deep into the rabbit hole, which is to say,
All right, good.
I think that, I think probably three separate points. The first is, I think, AI results and LLM appearances is absolutely a metric people need to be optimizing for. I think it's nonsense when people are like, oh, ChatGPT merely gets 1 billion searches a day compared to Google's 14, and only 20% of them have search intent. I've been seeing that on the internet. It's like, dude,
Yes.
it's a year old. It's going to just Google my hot take. Even though
70% growth rate or something insane of like a very short period. You might want to pay attention.
Yeah, like I think there's that said, I also understand the pendulum can swing too far. But I think LLM traffic and optimizing for it is a trend to pay attention to.
Yeah.
Second, I think that ChatGPT and these others have effectively a stakeholder problem. And I've written about this on LinkedIn a few times, where these LLMs basically ingest the internet and synthesize it and give Tye an answer or Amro an answer to like what to cook in the kitchen or what kind of sneakers or whatever to get. And I think that the old bargain, the old payment that happened between Google and search engines and publishers was Google's going to scrape your stuff, but you're going to get some traffic back from that scraping machine. And we see that the Google AI mode or the ChatGPT or LLMs or whatever, we saw from the Cloudflare data a few months back that like the amount that they're scraping versus the amount of traffic they deliver is orders of magnitude upside down compared to what Google search used to be. And so I think there's this fundamental like exchange problem where the incentive for publishers like whoever, like US News or Forbes or whoever it is, or Red Ventures, any of these guys, the incentive to go invest in localizing a bunch of industry data or stress testing the methodologies for how to rank the best credit cards, whatever it is, the
Yeah.
incentive to do that, if you're just going to suck up that data and present it to the user with no attribution, no pay, I think that's a real stakeholder problem. And I think you see these people saying like AI slop is sort of getting fed back into the machine and it's like eating itself tail. I see that.
Yeah.
And so I had a third point. I totally don't remember what it was.
Well, I know. I think that the last one's so strong, it's worthy of exploration. So it kind of begets the question of if that model's been inverted, if that model's changing, and that bargain is now shifted and maybe doesn't work as it should. Obviously, there's talk and speculation of like what is the new structure that's more rebalanced appropriately for the publisher, for the creator, for the writer, etc. Do you believe in your mind, what is the scenario that could, is there a scenario that could be rebalanced there where the open AIs of the world are like, hey, US News, we're going to cut you a deal the following way. I'm not super optimistic that that even remotely makes sense, but I'm just wondering where you see that bargain shifting, perhaps.
I mean, it's a question that has been on my mind for a year and a half. I mean, and I don't think there's a super satisfying answer or a clear resolution to it. But here's some thoughts. And oh man, I've got a whiteboard. I've got a dry erase marker.
Yes.
Do I do it? Oh, okay, yeah.
Do it.
Do
it.
Do it. So I mean, I think like if you look at it, there's a couple of options that sort of exist, right? Like I think one option is the sort of pay to scrape. Oh my God, this is a terrible looking blue marker. What in God's name was I thinking?
It's all right. We're working on it. We're always being testing. Let's go with the red. Go with the black.
This black one's hardly worth it. But so like I think there's the pay to scrape model, which you get from like Claire, I think is trying to do that. And I'm not super bullish on the idea that Cloudflare can sort of be a toll booth between the entire internet and these LLMs. Maybe. It's interesting. But I think
it's one step.
Yeah, I mean, where I get stuck on it is like, what's the price of a scrape? You know, what's the right price relative to each query? And I think that Google, if you think about Google differently as a search engine and think about it more as a pricing engine relative to, we will serve traffic to you, and publishers or media companies or whatever can sort of figure out the relative value of that visitor and then prioritize against it. I think that it gets really fuzzy when you have pay per scrape, even if you have variable pricing, which I know they've talked about. It's like, you know, if Best Credit Cards is one of the most valuable visitors on the internet, and, you know, well, exactly how much is that scrape worth if you're going to mosh it up with 14 other, you know, sources? I don't know. Versus an article that says, you know, should I use my Chase Rewards card to redeem for such and such purchase? What's the pricing of that? Really complicated question. And I think like feels good to say that you know, Cloudflare will crush it and just be this auction. I don't know. I'm a little skeptical. I look at, there's a really interesting company who I'm kind of buddies with the CEO, Noah Greenberg, called Stacker, if you know Stacker. And so Stacker, I'm going to make Noah buy me a beer for mentioning him on this podcast. So
there you go.
You're welcome, Noah. So Stacker is this kind of syndication network that helps brands that have developed really good original research and syndicates it out to a network of lots of, I think it's like 300 small newspapers like the Sacramento Bee or something. And so these small newspapers will very, very often pick up this original research from these brands. So if like Mint or Intuit or something does a really interesting piece, it gets pushed out to lots of newspapers, they tend to pick it up. What Noah has been writing about on LinkedIn, and it's interesting, is that that's like catnip to the LLMs. They love when your brand, when Intuit is picked up by 200 newspapers, they stand up and pay attention and cite Intuit a whole lot more. And I think also the information within that piece of content. Oh my God, this marker is lousy. I'll sit down and
It's
not
okay.
go whiteboard, but
It's all right.
the
It,
the the information within those pieces is also getting picked up and cited. So if Intuit mentions like 6 tools that are really valuable, those tools end up being perceived as more valuable to the LLMs. And so one thing that I think could really be prone to corruption, but could be a model is, if you're doing a page like best credit cards, and you know that the LLMs are paying attention to the brands mentioned on that page, maybe you are charging a fee to get mentioned. Maybe the publisher finds a way to like charge that fee. But again, that's so prone to corruption because it's like, well, what if the best credit card company doesn't pay to get mentioned on that site? You really get kind of a challenge. And I'm trying to think about how do you capture as a media company or publisher the value of not ever, getting profit, but instead just having an influence over what
it sort of reminds me, I recall, I want to say it was Connie Chen of A16Z. I've mentioned her in the past. I don't know, you've probably heard of her before. I'd have to fact check that if I got that right. But her and a number of other colleagues were talking a lot about kind of the explosion of micropayments over the last 15 years in Asia in particular, and how, again, not saying this is going to make sense, but I'm wondering if there's maybe a little bit of a shift to that. You obviously saw Meta recently with like, hey, you can do the ad-free version for the membership, and maybe offering more consumer and publisher flexibility of just how that ecosystem works, and a little less like either fall into this bucket or good luck kind of thinking. Um, I wonder if there may be something there around micropayments where there's some value distribution, but you're not like, going all in on one or the other. It's a really fascinating topic that I think you've kind of touched on together here.
And I think perplexity is that there's some discussion that perplexity is talked about sort of being maybe the Spotify of the internet, where Spotify then, or excuse me, perplexity kind of distributes royalties out the back akin to a Spotify. I kind of go back to that question though about same thing like Cloudflare, like, well, what's the value of a scrape? I think that when you get the traffic in and you're able to see how users behave, what their lifetime value is and whether they convert and all that, I think that you can tell what the value of that is and you can allocate resources into it appropriately. You look at what Google incentivized, what the Google search system incentivized that I was a part of, and plenty of publishers are a part of, is this sort of arms race of updating and improving the pages that are the most valuable. And so, I'm going to make up something that I was never a part of, but if it was like best travel destinations in Europe, let's just assume that that's a really valuable query.
Yep.
Best homes. I remember when I worked in real estate tech, best homes in Santa Monica, California, or in Vienna, Virginia.
Sure.
Those are super valuable terms for Zillow and whatever real estate.
Yeah.
So there becomes this arms race around people to improve and improve and improve those pages to try to be ranked in the number one spot. Whereas a more informational page, because the value of the traffic is lower, doesn't get as much attention and priority. And so like, again, in a world where, some central resource like Perplexity or Cloudflare is setting the price per scrape, that will have a profound effect on how much attention those pieces of content get. And I feel like Google, in a way, by doing it through visitors, that system became more efficient over time. And I just agree that the Cloudflare moderated pricing or perplexity moderated pricing, does that get more efficient over time or not?
Yeah.
I sort of think about
Yeah, I think so. And I think we've all, I mean, gosh, we remember the days when it was like Wild West beyond belief, and there was all kinds of gaming, and you could, print money if you were kind of falling into gray areas of SEO and even SEM paid. And I think that's evolving. I think I think we're going to see something similar here. I like we're starting to provide real help in terms of this area, just candidly, of like getting technical knowledge to look at things, to look at competitors across search, across AI, and say, hey, here's where you're showing up. What is it going to take to get here? Here's what we suggest investing in. That's a really interesting challenge, and I think that's going to be, certainly needed. And I think counseling people on, obviously, we've talked, well beyond click, we have to look at exposure. We have to look at those things. So the ball's sort of moved a little. We have to kind of monitor that and improve it. And I think you're right on. I think it will get better. I know there were some folks talking about today, even dropping with the news. I know some of the people were talking about, was it Andrew Seaford, who does a lot on mobile and attribution and
that.
the inevitable ad network, where he's his voice of like everything is an ad network. The ads are coming to it now, in particular with the Stripe post Stripe announcement. So
Yeah.
I don't know what your thoughts are there, since we're just going ham on this concept, but I think it's worthy.
We said we weren't going into the rabbit hole, and here we are. Yeah, I think that it's an interesting time we're in. I mean, I guess something I've written about on LinkedIn is that OpenAI and ChatGPT have majority share of this LLM market. It's something like 3/4 of market share belongs to OpenAI and ChatGPT.
Yeah.
You have to sort of set the rules of the game. Okay, like Gemini is a small percentage, Perplexity is a small percentage, whatever.
Yep.
Like Grok is a small percentage. It's basically ChatGPT's game to call. And I think ChatGPT has not really done a good job about telling the world how it wants outside companies to interface with it. And I'm going to go down this rabbit hole for a second.
Totally. Yeah.
Look at the biggest marketplaces on the internet. Marketplaces that govern the biggest transactions that that in the world. Look at real estate marketplaces like Zillow, or Amazon and commerce marketplaces, or
Yeah.
any of these markets.
eBay was kind of the foundation of the internet in some ways with Amazon. I mean,
Yeah, and
Zillow, Redfin, yeah.
Zillow, Redfin, and each of these, or credit card marketplaces, there's many. And the point is that all of these marketplaces are optimized for the old world of search. And there's always been 3 or 4 or 5 top marketplaces, and then a long tail below it, and they're all kind of grappling and fighting to be in first place. I think what we're seeing, but the early stuff that I'm seeing, is there's starting to be these MCP, Model Context Protocol, or other sort of enterprise partnerships that happen between some of the biggest marketplaces and ChatGPT, OpenAI. And I think of what I had heard of in the last couple of weeks. My buddy Daniel Lysott is the CMO of LegalZoom, and LegalZoom did a partnership and connected in with OpenAI. So you'll see kind of LegalZoom results in parts of OpenAI. Zillow has announced that they're doing some sort of partnership, and so you'll probably be able to talk to your ChatGPT and get listings, is presumably what's going to happen. And so companies are starting to integrate kind of piecemeal, and it tends to be like the dominant marketplaces in how efficient. Like, here's what I worry about is, why did Google beat AOL and Yahoo in the early days of search? Well, AOL and Yahoo were doing exactly what OpenAI and ChatGPT are doing now. They would sign a couple of enterprise deals and say, oh, this one company will handle all our travel traffic. This other guy will handle all of this traffic. And those were inefficient systems. Google did something different. Google said,
auction.
There's an auction for our ads. Anyone can play. The more you pay, the more traffic you'll get. And it was a competition that made better and better and better ads, and it accrued value to the system and to Google and to the user through the competition.
Yep.
in the organic SERPs, like the arms race we talked about earlier, there's a competition for the traffic and the value accrued to the user who gets incredible, up-to-date, valuable information, right? Google harnessed the power of the open internet through search. I worry that ChatGPT and OpenAI have this real genuine stakeholder problem. They're not really harnessing, they're not creating an open internet. They're creating a gated community like AOL and Yahoo, where if you can go sign some, some amazing enterprise deal because you're the number one marketplace like Zillow, great. What if you're Homestuck? What if you're,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Right. And
Yeah.
last thing I'll say is what I see is a more open AI would be one that allows ads and allows multiple people to compete for the organic result and paid result, similar to Google, even if the interface looks different. And so I think with Fidji Simo coming in to lead ChatGPT, and you're starting to hear in this last week, kind of mid-September, at least 2025, she's poaching folks from like the Meta ad sales teams. And I think you're going to start seeing an ad unit built out. ChatGPT Pulse is coming out. It's like a feed of stuff. And that seems to be, I saw someone say that's a perfect substrate for ads. So I think we're going to see more. I think we have to see, I think we're going to see more places where the open internet will be able to interface and participate in ChatGPT.
Yeah.
It has not been the case in 2025, but I think it will be the case in 2026. That's the prediction.
I love that, Amro. It reminds me of I spend a lot of time nerding out on user experience best practices for a variety of reasons in my performance marketing world. And one of the concepts, I'm going to butcher the user experience naming of it, but it's like, how do you create familiar frameworks and mental models for people that they can fall into? You don't want to necessarily reinvent the wheel on everything. And I almost feel like it's similar to that, where the unit economics of business, of network effects, of growth that's worked and performed well is really a kind of important part of the recipe for OpenAI and for the open internet to actually exist and perform well and be valuable for all the stakeholders, not just one or two. And so I love where you're going with transparency, more open, quote unquote, actually have an ad or a ability to say, hey, I'm publishing the rules of the game for you, similar to how Matt Cutts used to do back in the day with Google, and say, if you do these things, you're more likely to do XYZ and get value and participate in the marketplace. So what an amazing this is just this has been really interesting.
Yeah, no, I appreciate I appreciate we got a chance to sort of riff on some of the biggest I think it's the biggest show in town right now, So
Yeah.
what
We skipped over
we'll
we
do.
skipped over the, I mean, look, if people want to message you and talk to Amro and say, how did you fix XYZ? You have so many learnings, but I think that was fun and juicy to dive into for people. And I think it'll be appreciated. Um, we jumped over a lot of questions, so we may have to do a part two in the future with Amro if he's open to it, maybe down the road. But do you want to go down the final lap of just getting to know you a bit and asking a few personal questions? Do you have some time?
Yeah, let's do it. And I'll just say, it's awesome to be on here. You had a great podcast, and I was stoked to get invited to be part of it.
Thanks, man. Thank you.
Sure. I'll say, I guess the maybe a thing that I'll impart is that I had a talk with the U.S. News and World Report interns, me and a few of the other division GMs this summer,
Mhm.
and I think one kind of advice that I gave to them, but I think pertains to all of us, regardless of what level you are in your career, what stage you are in your career, is it's so important to be a lifelong learner and keep learning and keep sort of being adaptive and resilient and just going where your learnings take you. And I think especially so many my peer group of like mid-level or senior executives feel a lot of fear in this year of 2025 of what's next, how's robots are going to take our jobs and whatever. There's always there's always some like pessimistic bear case to innovation and creative destruction and stuff. And I think just the same way I sort of said it to the interns, I would also say to all of us as mid-level, senior, whatever execs, is, stay open, stay learning, and sort of go where the learning takes you, and sort of work with the system that's around you. And I think that's good advice. Just try
Yeah.
to stay open to where. I think
Yeah.
you go to a very different phase of how the internet works and monetizes, and just sort of
Yeah.
staying empirical and stay learning is the way.
Stay empirical, stay learning. Very, very aligned with the pod's message and my reason for being. And I'm just grateful for you to chat and learn and dive into this stuff. Speaking of which, we've gone over because we dropped so much knowledge. But I have a great final get to know Amro question, just in terms of family adventure. What's your go-to recommendation for the audience that you suggest?
For family adventure,
Little maybe like a vacation or a getaway or a trick. Anything fun you want to share with the audience?
sure. My wife we recently celebrated my wife's birthday. It was kind of a milestone birthday. I won't say the number, but it was a milestone birthday. And
Happy
we
birthday to her.
thank you. Yeah, I'll pass that along time. And we went horseback riding. And it's not, if you live in the Washington D.C. area, it's not like there's a million places to go. So we found in Charlottesville, Virginia, which is where we both went to school at the University of Virginia. We went down to Charlottesville. We found this like horse ranch that's right outside of town, and we signed up for horseback riding lessons with us and our 6-year-old daughter. And I was assuming that like by lessons they would teach us how to ride a horse. We literally got there and they got each of us on a horse. They gave me the largest horse I've ever seen in my life. It was like the Chevy Suburban of horses. It was enormous. Okay, so its head was like the size of my torso. And they were just like, "All right, here you go." They got me up on a ladder. They got me on it. I was like, what do I say to the horse? Like, what do you, and they were like, "Yeah, you just say whoa if you want it to stop." I was like, "That's it. That's all the guidance I'm getting." And so we immediately started taking the horses into the mountains and did a trail ride. And I was like, "Holy cow! I'm in the middle of like a mountain range on a horse within like 10 minutes of getting on it." But the short recommendation, it's a great,
Love it.
you can share more, but horseback riding, totally recommend it. Awesome time. Seeing my 6-year-old ride a horse by herself, just
Yeah.
beat it. It's awesome.
Oh man, that's amazing, and definitely on brand to some of the stuff I've been sharing lately, and grew up with that world. I was lucky to. It was kind of funny because my parents were really devoted to that world. So to get to expose, it's so cool that you experienced that. We're actually taking our daughter for her fifth birthday
Yeah.
in a couple of weeks to do similar. I think she did it a couple of years ago. So yeah, it's cool to pick up on the communication of the horse and rider, and it takes a bit to get there, but it's cool that you got to experience that.
And my horse's name was Sully, I believe. And I think we developed a bond in a couple hours. We were like,
There you go, man. Uh, we'll have to talk more about that in future conversations because there's a lot there. Amro, thank you so much for coming on. You were super generous with your time. For those that want to learn more about the journey with you and building out this whole amazing group with US News and what you're up to, what's the best place to find you?
you catch me on LinkedIn. That's where we all are, isn't it? So yeah,
Yes,
but
sir.
I'm so glad I could come to it.
Thank you for taking the time, Amro. Have an awesome rest of your day. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks. Thank you.